Welcome to That's Gotta Hurt Live, wherever you're watching. Hope you're making today and tonight your masterpiece. My name is Dr. David Geier, orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, media medical expert. Whether you're somebody that likes to bet on sports, whether you play fantasy sports, or you're just a sports fan, I help you understand the injuries of pro and college athletes so you can win your bets tonight or this coming weekend, win your fantasy league, or just enjoy the games more. Very excited to be with you. Not really a super eventful night of injuries to talk about, but a few good, interesting topics. Again, remember, I am not involved in the medical care. I am not reporting on anything, breaking any news. I am analyzing what we are talking about. Robert, good to see you. A lot of interesting stuff. So let's start real quickly with Budda Baker of the Arizona Cardinals. The safety had this really scary injury. I am sure whether you watched it or you saw it on the sports shows and sports centers this morning, had a really scary injury in the third quarter of their loss to the Los Angeles Rams, where his head basically collided with the knee of Cam Akers with the Rams, was down on the field for a long time. They ended up spine boarding him, having the C-collar and all of that, was taken to Cedars-Sinai Hospital and stayed overnight actually for evaluation for a concussion. Now, he was moving his hands and legs before he left the field and basically was released the next morning, doing well. There was a picture that he put on social media flying home and saying that everything's good. Those are scary injuries. At the NFL level, they tend to turn out well. I think it's been, I can't even remember how long since they've had a player paralyzed. A long time. I guess the one a few years ago with the Steelers player was probably the closest thing to that. But it's been a long time. But that's why they have neurosurgeons at every NFL game. People always think, oh, they got an orthopedic surgeon there. They don't realize how big the NFL requires the medical staffs to be. 3 orthopedic surgeons have to be on the sidelines for the home team, 2 for the away team. 2 medical doctors for the home team, 1 for the away team, the non-orthopedic doctors. Home team has to have an anesthesiologist, a neurosurgeon, a dentist. I'm pretty sure they have to have an eye doctor, ophthalmology doctor type of thing. And obviously all the athletic trainers and all that. It's a huge medical staff for that reason. Likewise with the anesthesiologist, somebody that can immediately get an airway if somebody goes into cardiac arrest, basically so they can intubate the player on the field. That you don't ever see that, fortunately, but it's a really, really important part of it in a sport like football. Fortunately, he didn't need any of that other than the spine boarding and getting him to a hospital. Fortunately, it turned out to be a precaution. All turns well, but very, very scary injury. All right, moving to another team in the NFL, Jimmy Garoppolo, San Francisco 49ers quarterback. We've known all along this season he's had an injury, I think, to this ulnar collateral ligament to the base of his right thumb, his throwing hand. He's sort of played with that. Now word comes out that he had a mild shoulder sprain in this last game where they beat the Dallas Cowboys. Kyle Shanahan, the head coach, says he should be good for practice Tuesday, which would have been today. Now, here's the thing, and before I show you what I think the injury is, there was reports from a reporter for Fox Sports 1 saying that no, he's hearing that this is a lot worse and there's a good chance he may not start. So this could be one to watch for. You never know necessarily what to believe. There have been some reports in the past that Kyle Shanahan downplays injury information in the media, so we don't know here. So usually when they're talking about a shoulder sprain, we're talking about a sprain of what's called the AC joint of the shoulder. So this is a right shoulder. Looking at it, this is the humerus, this is the scapula. You got the ball and socket, so to speak. Here is your collarbone coming across the front, the clavicle, where it meets the tip of your shoulder blade, the acromion. This joint right there is the AC joint, right on top of your shoulder there. And what happens, if you remember the term separated shoulder, that's where the end of your these ligaments tear, and basically you get the collarbone sticking up over the acromion. You see a big lump right there, a big prominent separation. Now, obviously, if it's significantly separated, you'd be out. That would actually need surgery sometimes. But if it's a mild sprain of that joint, meaning these ligaments are stretched or partially torn, or maybe just one of the ligaments is torn, not something that needs surgery. Typically, that's an issue of pain as much as anything. Now, remember, this is his throwing shoulder. Plus, if you get driven to the ground directly on that, one, it's going to hurt a lot. And yes, in theory, you could make it worse. That's typically how you suffer that injury, is that you get your shoulder driven directly into the ground, or you're hit directly on the outside of the shoulder by a defender. This is one that makes me a little nervous, but again, it's usually pain control and just getting those muscles around that shoulder joint to get stronger. It's hard to really speed up how long it takes to not hurt. And when that's your throwing arm, that could be problematic. So I'm not ready to necessarily fall into that FS1 reporters thing that there's a good chance he won't play this weekend and Trey Lance would have to play. But it's one to keep an eye on. I expect that the betting line has gone from, I think it started at 5.5, went down to 5, but now it's creeped back up to 6 point favorite for Green Bay. I expect it may creep up a little higher if there's concern that Jimmy Garoppolo is not there this weekend. All right, now moving to the NBA, let's talk Myles Turner. Myles Turner is interesting. You know I'm a Memphis Grizzlies fan. There's always been talk that we're going to make a trade before the trade deadline to bring in somebody to get us to kind of the next level, some sort of established star. Myles Turner with the Indiana Pacers center, is thought to be one of the players available for trade. The Pacers are supposedly willing to shop him, willing to shop Domantas Sabonis and or Karis LeVert. Now, Turner, I don't know that helps much to the Memphis Grizzlies. We've got a lot of big men, not a big deal, but there's a lot of teams that do need him. Now come reports that he has a stress reaction in his foot. Now, if you want to get good information on this and the next one we're going to talk about, Jeff Stotts on Twitter, he's got a website, instreetclothes.com. He's fantastic. I've talked to him. I interviewed him for my book a few years ago. He is an athletic trainer, I want to say in Arkansas, who for a long time now, he's been maintaining a database of NBA injuries. Basically, every day he goes in, checks the video for all the different injuries, logs all this different information. He's been doing it for years. It's the largest or the longest running database of NBA injuries out there. Now, a lot of his content isn't for free, so you don't have access to that much on his website, but he's great on Twitter. Anyway, as he explains, a stress reaction is a precursor to a stress fracture. Now, a stress fracture is where you get a little microscopic crack in one of the bones, but it's not out of place. Stress reaction is sort of a precursor, and if you shut somebody down from that, that typically does pretty well. If you catch it early before it becomes a stress fracture, you typically avoid surgery. And shutting people down is rest, maybe put them in a boot and avoid any stress on there. Now, Jeff tweeted today about Myles Turner, and a lot of it depends on which bone it is, and that isn't known. It could be the fifth metatarsal, the one that becomes a Jones fracture if it's an acute injury, but that's a commonplace of a stress fracture or stress reaction, and those can be problematic. The navicular, which can be really problematic, really poor blood supply to that. Other areas maybe not so bad, like the calcaneus, which would be uncommon in an NBA player. But as he said, and according to his database, he followed other players that have had stress reactions in their feet, and the average time missed was 20 games, which is a long time. Here's where that matters. One, obviously, if you're betting on the Pacers, just know you're probably not going to have Myles Turner for a while. But more importantly, this definitely affects his trade value in the sense that big men, forward centers, especially as you get around the 7-foot tall site, and Jeff told me this when I wrote my book, his data shows that big men with stress injuries, stress fractures especially, 7 foot and taller, don't typically do very well recovering from that. Not to say there's going to be any worry that Myles Turner won't get back, but that's got to linger in the back of your head if you're an NBA team. Is he going to have foot problems going forward for the rest of his career? If so, maybe we don't give up 2 first-round picks and a couple of players for Myles Turner. With the trade deadline coming up and the team saying he's going to be out past the trade deadline, I'm not convinced they'll be able to trade him, for one, but if they do, I don't think they'll get nearly what they would have gotten otherwise. Now, maybe you'll find an NBA team that's like, hey, we don't need him right away. We trust our medical staff to get this better. Great, more power to you. But it would make me a little nervous if I was a team looking to trade for an established center in this league. And I don't know that I give up quite as much, because that could potentially be a player that doesn't help you long term if his foot health is worrisome. Speaking of that, Denver Nuggets forward Bol Bol was attempted to be traded last week to the Detroit Pistons. That trade was voided when he failed the physical with the Detroit Pistons. Now we find out why, as he is set to undergo foot surgery. This comes from Shams Charania of The Athletic, who says that he's going to be out 8 to 12 weeks after because he needs foot surgery. Clearly, that's why the Pistons voided the trade. For the same reason I told you with Myles Turner, big men, especially a guy, this is Manute Bol's son, those of you that watched the NBA way back in the day, very tall, you worry about foot injuries in guys that big. Now, there has been nothing that I have seen that has reported what bone, but when you're talking foot surgery, you're typically thinking Jones fracture or stress fracture on the outside of the foot that isn't going to heal, so you put a screw, my hand's in the way here, but you would put a screw right down that bone. Or the other one I would see as potentially being a problem is an injury to the navicular. This is the inside of the foot. This is the arch of the foot. The navicular is sort of a bone at the base of the midfoot, in the arch of the foot. Again, very poor blood supply. That's the bone, NBA historical fans, that's the bone that Michael Jordan broke in his second season that he missed more than half of the regular season for. He didn't have surgery. They just put him in a cast for months, which he hated every minute of. But typically in an athlete these days, we would fix that with surgery. Again, I don't know that it's either of those two injuries, but when you're talking a foot injury that requires surgery, I think it's one of those two. And yeah, 8 to 12 weeks sounds about right. But the bigger concern is long term. How likely is he going to get back to where he was? And he's kind of struggled. He's had sort of a haphazard NBA career anyway, but that one would certainly make me nervous. All right, that's all I've got for you. If there's any athletes you want to talk about, definitely send that my way. You can definitely post those, and if for some reason I don't know much about it, I can look it up really quickly. Also, if you know people that like sports and want to know about injuries, definitely contact me and I can put those into the next show. Or tell your friends to join us on YouTube on weeknights, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The more people that know about it, the better the discussion, all of that kind of good stuff. Kind of a short show like I told you it would be. Not all that much interesting going on. Hopefully tomorrow night we'll have a little bit more to talk about. Very, very appreciative that you could join us, and I will see you right back here tomorrow night. Take care.